In January 2023, HBO released its new animated series Velma, which immediately got the world talking, though not necessarily in a complimenting way. Velma is currently sitting at the astonishingly low 1.5 stars at IMDb with almost 70,000 ratings. If nothing else, two things can be surely said about this show. Firstly, people found it quite terrible, and secondly, people hate watched it into popularity. Now that the season is finally over, we can look back onto it and see whether it was, in reality, as bad as people claimed. Welcome to Comicsing, and we are starting right after the intro. We'll start with the franchise. Plot summary at the IMDb is relatively short and states that the animation series encompasses, quote, the origin of the sleuth and member of the Mystery Inc. gang Velma. When you put things like that, you'd expect an ordinary viewer to look forward to a plot that takes place somewhere in the 20th century and shows young Velma navigating the world before the Scooby Gang came into existence. With an emphasis on Velma, it wouldn't have been totally surprising not to see other familiar characters like Fred, Shaggy, or Daphne. But what is surprising is the direction where the animation series has actually gone. Not only it is set in the present day with all the modern technology and not so subtle hints at current political issues.
Is it funny women make 20% less than men and women of color even less? I can't stop laughing.
But it also has nothing to do with the Velma people used to know and like. If anything, HBO's Velma seems more like a parody or something straight out of parallel universe that was sealed for good until now. Another important thing about the franchise is its characters, which brings us to the next point. Besides the obvious race swapping, which is not necessarily a bad thing all on its own, none of the character has anything to do with their original selves, which is a bad thing no matter what angle you use to look at it. Shaggy, who for some unspecified reason is called Norville, has yet to develop his goofy, fun personality, and a long, long way it will be. His whole deal is that he's there to help Velma with everything at any time, day or night, sacrifice his own interests, not complain, forget that he has a life too, forgive all insults being thrown his way. And that's about it. And yet he is by far the best of the bunch. Daphne's character traits end with her being hot and Asian and, oh no, that was it. Fred is a typical white straight teenager from a wealthy family, so, cause and effect, he has to be portrayed as an insufferable man-baby who, for the life of him, can't even use a table knife to cut his food. But none of the characters, however shallow and annoying they might appear, none of them come even close to Velma. She is an ultimate mega-boss in a long row of insufferable characters ever. What makes her so special, might you ask? Well, let's see. She only thinks about herself. She disregards the troubles of people around her, even if they are her friends or family.
Now you have Gigi to talk about boring stuff like your swords and feelings.
She never listens.
My fault? Nothing is ever my
She's never sorry. She insults everyone constantly.
Like the dessert course at an Indian restaurant. Just forget it.
She thinks that she's always right, and the worst of all, she never has to deal with the consequences of her actions. Everything works out for her in the end without her having to right her wrongs, or at least acknowledge that she is not at all perfect. And yet another worst thing is that every other character seems to be swept off their feet by her. Shaggy/Norville is in love with her at some point, Daphne is in love with her at some point too, Fred is in love with her at some point free, random serial killer wants to take her brain and put it into someone else's body to run an enterprise. And yet she's not the villain but the main character, so root for her, okay? Let's face the facts. The only thing this Velma is good for is have her face on a piece of paper on the wall to throw darts at it. Now let's take a look at the plot. A typical whodunit. Local schoolgirls are being found dead with their brains surgically removed. Serial killer is on a leash, police are useless, we've seen it all before. Velma is on a case, though on a different one. She looks into the disappearance of her mom. The girls can die all that they want. Earth will turn flat if Velma will care about anyone other than herself. Daphne is also looking for a mom, but not Velma's, her own, and for her dad too. Missing parents seem to be a very recurring theme in this show, by the way. Fred is looking for the ways to finally hit puberty. Not kidding, that is a real issue. And to prove himself worthy to his not missing but very present parents. And Norval is just there being a doormat for everyone passing by. If you take the plot as something completely disconnected from the Scooby-Doo universe, it doesn't seem particularly bad in its entirety. From a bird-eye perspective. A very high-flying blind bird, that is. But in all seriousness, plot is not the weakest link. Episodes are around 24 minutes long, and they are not dragging, not challenging you into keeping your eyes open in front of a screen, and you probably won't end up on the brink of boredom cover, even if you watch the whole season in one go. Ties to Scooby-Doo franchise really did put a lot of pressure and expectations on Velma. Meanwhile, animation series from pretty much the same niche of adult cartoons, for example Q-Force or Inside Job, they rely heavily onto the same politically and socially aware humor, and yet they were received pretty well by the general audiences. And they're both cancelled. Never mind then. Speaking of humor, there are so many jokes in this series. You could have died from asphyxiation not being able to breathe some air in between the laughs.
What are we selling?
Zoinks, Jeepers, Mystery Machine, and of course, ganja.
This is exactly what happened to my vlog about Lil Wayne.
Sorry, Howie Mandel.
Easy, Dr. Phil. Look for the stone that is as perfect as Woody Allen and Mia Farrow's marriage. Damn, this makes me think I could bag Don.
That is indeed if you would have been laughing. But you most likely won't, unless you are one of the creators of a show, as they probably are the only ones who find these jokes funny. They land like an ice cream cone dropped from a 15-story building onto the concrete pavement. Messy waste bin material. And also that tendency to explain jokes that you think that many people might not get. You don't explain jokes. That's what makes them unfunny. Come on, Comedy 101. If your jokes require a rocket science degree, maybe instead better go more into general audience relatable and less into fancy and elaborate. With all that said, the biggest question still remains. Who is this show even for? You'd expect the prime target audience to be the fans of the original Scooby who watched cartoons in the 80s and 90s and who will now come back for nostalgia's sake. But Velma disrespects original characters so much that even calling them paper copies of themselves would be an exaggeration. Better term is mutilated beyond every recognition except for clothes, which are fine. Even poor Mystery Inc. Van is shamed into being lame. No amount of nostalgia will help Velma's case after this blasphemy anymore. Adult cartoon viewers are being openly mocked, so scratch them as a prime audience as well. Every other person from political left, right, center, up, down, east, west is being ridiculed at one point or the other, and if not, you just wait until the second season comes. The show seems like a spiteful, spoiled little kid who doesn't know better and just does everything to piss everyone off. In conclusion, it might be said that Velma is actually pretty forgettable and borderline average. It has top-tier animation, Sincere applause for the VFX team, somewhat okayish overall plot, generic side characters reduced to cliché threads, and Velma, the worst main character imaginable. The main reason this series was even created is because studios needed to ride off that wave of appreciation and positivity created by the LGBTQ+ community after it was stated that Velma is, and always was, a lesbian. With little to no evidence in the existing Scooby-Doo media to back up this absolutely not retconned claim, something was needed and fast, so that is very likely how Velma came into existence. And though the backlash for this show is absolutely insane, there are at least 3 positive reviews at the IMDb page of people who liked it. Guess something else good came out of the show apart from millions and millions of views of YouTube rant reviews. So not everything was in vain. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel not to miss any of our content. As always, yours truly, Go Mixin'.